You are now tuning in to Lex and RDDC broadcast station, serving up on the double doses for us all.
Thank you and welcome back to the Real Double Dose channel. This is your host, Lex, coming to you straight from the heart where the talk is real and the vibe is always live. Like we always say, thank you for tuning in and being here with us again, because here, serving a slice of real and everyday life is what RDC is all about. For any questions, show requests, or feedback as anything under the sun you can think of, as always, reach out to us at Real Double Dose channel at yandex.com. That's YANDEX.com, and as well as realdoubledosechannel.blogspot.com. You can check out our expert guests, so much more, our links, as well as the About Me section, disclaimers, and anything you want for the books. And you can sign up for the travel giveaways. We know it's the COVID-19 going on. Hashtag you're staying at home. But at the same time, you still can sign up for these gift card giveaways, as well as Puerto Vallarta, Puerto Rico, so many places, Hawaii, that are given. So when it does end, you'll be able to have it there. So all the people who have claimed it already, thank you, and we appreciate you. And I just want to say, from all you who are on other platforms listening, which we do see you and we appreciate you from all across the international world, thank you from TuneIn, Stitcher Radio, Spreaker.com. We have iTunes, iHeart, SoundCloud, Deezer, Google Cast, 16 plus links you can check out. But without further ado, we have our wonderful guest expert, and that is Professor Pete Alexander. Professor Pete Alexander is a recovering hard-driving leader with over 30 years of sales, marketing, and entrepreneurial experience. Pete successfully battled the negative effects of stress head-on and developed the Lighten stress relief model that motivates his peers to take action in only a few minutes per day, which we all need, okay? His friendly, humorous demeanor, which I can say, Mr. Capri, and customized approach relates well to his clients and guarantees full value, and it is delivered, it's sealed, it's signed, because he is bomb.com. Thank you so much. And how are you doing, my dear?
I'm fantastic, Lex. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for coming. You know what? I could have talked to you all day. Well, let's not even play. I'm like, I know everyone's on here. Yeah, we formally didn't meet, did meet, the little action pause. But I mean, Professor Pete is off the chain. That's all I have to say. Yes. So you. You are. And I love your personality and your spirit, and you make it to the point where, man, I would be like, hey, can you be my personal therapist? We don't need Dr. Phil. We don't need Dr. Phil. We have Dr. Alexander here. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, like, all of us are getting to the point of excitement of understanding how and what made you go on this wonderful climb that you're still accelerating on.
Yeah, well, it started back in 2008. It was a perfect storm of stressful activities that we can all appreciate. I mean, if you think we all have had those times where the mental and emotional strain becomes so overwhelming. And 2008 was a perfect storm for me because I had all these responsibilities, both career and personal, that were all pulling me in different directions. And I ended up being diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes.
Oh,
and
wow.
No one in my family has diabetes. And I exercise regularly, so, I'm in shape. And so everybody was saying, how could you have diabetes? Yet the crazy thing for me was I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to it. Instead, I continued to burn the candle at both ends for another 10 years.
Wow.
Until I ended up in the emergency room with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for the listeners who don't know what that is, my body was actually eating itself alive because of my stress. So
Wow.
I ended up, and then they transferred me first time in my life to the ICU. And I had to spend several days in the ICU recovering from this because I was 1 hour from being comatose because I pushed myself to the limit.
Wow. So keto, so what was it like? Was it just kind of, I mean, I'm kind of green at that, but I'm thinking, what was it, burning or something? Like, we mean eating alive?
So what happens is my sugars, so as a diabetic, our blood sugars are basically, our pancreas stops producing enough insulin to give us the, to calm down the sugars in our body.
Okay.
And so if our sugars are really high, then what happens is our body starts to burn other tissues so that it can try and survive. And how crazy it was for me, I had pushed myself so hard, putting my career in front of my health, that when I was admitted to the hospital, they first thought I was having a heart attack because I was very lethargic and I could barely move. And then they measured my sugars, and it was off the charts. These are medical grade devices, and all it could say was high, which means that I was running over 800. And just to give perspective, normal blood sugars, you want to have them around 80 to 100.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was super dehydrated. And then here's the crazy thing. So you would think that would, shock me into doing something about it. Actually not. A couple days into the ICU, and mind you, my boss at the time knew I was in the emergency room and knew I was in the ICU after that. I get this text at about 6 a.m. and, the hospital staff was poking me every half an hour. So you don't sleep in hospitals. It's a farce to think that you get a good night's rest.
Seriously, yeah.
So at about 6 a.m., I get this text from my boss saying, you have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it? And I'm looking at that and I'm going, oh my gosh, I completely forgot because, I was trying to focus on my health. And what a surprise. I don't have my laptop in the ICU. I just had my phone. So I'm pushing the envelope of trying to reschedule this webinar. And since they were checking my blood every half an hour, finally, on the second day, it had come back down into normal, more normal, reasonable, with a couple 150 or so. So you could see the slope coming down. And as soon as they checked my blood again, once I got this text, it was a 90-degree angle, and my blood sugars were shooting straight back up. And what happened was, the nurse at the time, she just said, you realize that this is what put you in this hospital bed in the first place. Ooh. And that was the epiphany moment that I needed to hear from a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And I went, what am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
So I just started to focus on, different stress relief tools and techniques that I read about, I was told about, etc. And so once I started applying all these different techniques, not only did my stress start going down, my blood sugars stayed down, I lost weight, and my energy went way, way up. So it was kind of like I had found the fountain of youth. And several of my friends and coworkers and stuff, they said, you ought to write a book about this. And so I did, and it took off on Amazon, and it was a lot of fun to write the book, and that's what put me on this new path where I realized that there are a lot of people in the same position that I was, where I was making the very bad trade of my mental and physical health, my career, or other responsibilities. And the reality is, without your health, nothing else matters. Because if you think about it, the last time that you were really sick, whether it was a flu or something else, did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed?
Very true.
Probably not. And so it doesn't matter what job you have, doesn't matter the family or friends or whatever else you want to do. If you don't have your health, you're not going to want to do anything else.
No. And you know what? I have to, piggyback on that. I noticed that too. Like when you're sitting there sick, things are going on. It's just to the whole point where you don't care. And I was getting, after my sister had passed, in 2018, I was getting that point where I would eat something and it would completely just not settle in my stomach. Like literally I was going through, I thought it was dairy poisoning at first, but it was to the point where everything came up. I mean, I got so sick. I thought I was going to die. My spine felt like it was snapping in half. I mean, I laid there just shivering and shaking, and I just tasted salt for over 24 hours, and I couldn't get back up on my feet for 5 days. And I could not think of a social media, a web page, a phone call that ever made me feel like I could care less when your health is in that point. And the same thing right now with stress. I am very bad at it, where I get to the point where I just internalize it and I try to make it not just like, oh, it's a positive day, it's going to be okay, and inside I'm dying, but it's to the point where my hives break out now. I notice that hives break out. You can't really see them, but you feel them. And I'm like, I see something on the news and all of a sudden I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. here we go. I can't even deal. I can't even
Exactly.
deal.
And it's really hard. That's one of the things I always recommend to people, especially nowadays, is don't watch the news. That unless you know, because I was a marketing major when I first went to college, and I can tell you that, you know, the classic thing like the Wizard of Oz looking behind the curtain, the whole thing is it's all about ratings. And
Yeah.
sadly, as human nature, we're not as drawn to the good news as we are to the bad news. So that's what the news sources, they send out all the bad information. So, you know, it's way more attractive to them to talk about the number of people who've died from COVID-19 versus the way more people who've actually recovered.
Yep.
And it's, you know, it's similar to, you know, that classic, if we've, you know, we've all probably been in a traffic jam where, you know, there's a car on the side of the road and it might be just somebody changing their tire, no big deal, but we all have to look because we want to, you know, we want to see the macabre, the gore, but we don't really want to see it, but we can't help but look, right?
Yeah, it's tempting. It's so tempting.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, that drama filled. You'll click on something that says man gets torn apart from a tiger. But when it comes down to someone just winning, you know, the lotto, you're like, I don't want to hear about that.
Exactly.
Let me see the gore. I can relate to someone getting chopped, you know, a little bit or something like that. I mean, I know that when it came down to having to deal with diabetes issues, I know my uncle passed away from that a few years ago before my sister did. They had amputated his second leg and he didn't. I mean, I guess through that process, he told the doctors he felt everything when they were doing it. But his was to the point, I didn't understand what he was saying about stress relation because all of a sudden, like his sugars were just super spiking. At the time, he had, I think he retired from the GM or something plant. I don't know what it was, Motortown City. I know it's wrong, but I can't. And he retired from there and he was like, him and his wife were taking medication, each other's medication every other day to just make it last. So I was like, wow, from that right there. And then a lot of them, like even my cousin, he gets to the point where his blood sugars are 38. Different ones.
Well, that's really low. That's really low.
Yeah, I mean, because when I heard about Holly Berry getting it, I was like, Holly Berry had collapsed on set, I guess. And I'm like, wow, this thing. And mine got to the point where my doctor was like, look, we're going to have to make sure we monitor what's going on. Because she had told me something. And you know what? I'm glad you brought this up, Professor P, because my doctor was telling me that she's like, you're a very like high stress case. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, everything affects you. Like I went in there, my blood pressure was off the charts, everything. And as soon as when I kind of tapped my mind into trying to do something, I literally, everything had almost normalized, but the stress triggered it so bad. And I was telling people about the cortisol, different stuff that I've heard, the little things I've heard, where I'm like, we're literally just killing ourselves every moment from worrying about what could happen and what is happening at that moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and it's exactly right, Lex, because what happens is our bodies are, for the most part, still designed like they were back in the Stone Age. And back then, our bodies were designed for short bursts of adrenaline and cortisone to help us deal with the stress of, you know, outrunning a T-Rex or a saber-toothed tiger. You know? But nowadays, because we are constantly on with our technology, we're mentally stressed and our minds have so much power over our bodies that we're constantly dumping into our when we get mentally stressed, we are constantly dumping into our bodies the cortisol, the adrenaline that is not necessary. And the direct correlation that happens is if a doctor said, oh, okay, well, diabetes doesn't directly cause, stress does not directly cause diabetes. What happens is when we're stressing ourselves out, we create cellular inflammation. And that cellular inflammation is what then directly causes diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc. because our bodies are trying to fight this and it doesn't know, you know, it just knows one way. It's like, okay, that we're going to either fight, we're going to flight, or, you know, it basically we have to do this response. But if we're keeping on dumping it in, it's these false starts that eventually something in our body breaks down. It says, I've had enough. And that's what happened to me. And that's what I'm educating my peers and others about. It's not worth it, because for me now with the diabetes, I have to be stuck checking it regularly. I have to be taking medication for the rest of my life. I have the potential, like what happened to your uncle, that I could be losing, parts of my body because it's not managed properly. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
Others, they get the strokes, they get the cancer, and it can be avoided if you listen to what your body is telling you. And there's early signs that even before you get any disease, there's early signs that your body will tell you, for things like you start getting a lot of neck and back aches because you've been stressed. That's a classic early sign. And if you just ignore it, then it starts progressing to get worse and worse. The migraine headaches, it might, weight fluctuations, those are the kind of things that your body's saying, hey, if something's not right, you better check it out and take care of yourself.
That's what I was thinking too. I was just about to ask you about the headaches, because I was thinking, I'm like, man, I'm not a headache person at all, but man, I've been getting headaches like there's no tomorrow. Like, I feel like they're gonna just knock me down. And some people, I thought my lash outs were, and I do have lash outs where people are just like, hey, Lex, and I'm like, what do you want? Just in my head, I'm in my head trying to figure out. And I noticed that I could be in a great mood, and all of a sudden I start thinking of something or see something. Or read something, and I'm like irritated immediately. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I lose thought into that moment of just letting the stress build, and then I just pop off. And I'm just, oh gosh.
What you're talking about, it's very similar. When we're stressed too, if you think from a mental standpoint, the lack of concentration, we're thinking, I'm having trouble really concentrating on a particular thought. Or, as lashing out on people, it could go, there's a lot of people who have mood swings where all of a sudden, they're, happy, and all of a sudden something comes along, something comes along that turns your day sideways, and the next thing you know, you're lashing out, you're angry, etc., or you get these panic attacks that you didn't have before, or you've got this anxiety over some future event that really you're worrying about unnecessarily. And sadly, a lot of people in the opioid addiction, that anything that's prescription drug or alcohol addiction, that's a mental thing, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to escape from the stressors that we don't want to face.
Yeah, that is definitely hitting every point that I feel like what's going on. It's almost like you're like my little crystal ball right now. I'm like, just seeing
that.
The
headaches, yeah. The thing is that if you know your body, and we all get headaches, but if you're reaching like for the Excedrin bottle every day or every other day, there's something wrong, because you shouldn't be needing it that often.
Yeah, I was telling my friend that. I had asked him, I think a couple of days ago, I'm like, how's everything going? He goes, I don't know. I'm through a half a bottle of Tylenol already in the next couple of days. I'm over there. I said, well, wait a minute. You're taking these things like Skittles. Like, you're popping them and popping them. It's okay. I'll breathe it through. And I thought about, I don't know. It was, like I tell people, I know all you who are listening in from now to when to then who will be getting this. It's just the whole point of understanding that I don't have every quote down to the T, but it was something that I saw, and it was one of the Instagram posts, and it said, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. And if you're anxious, and or feeling stressed, you're living in the future. And if you're basically balancing yourself off to be calm, you're in the present right now. And I was like, yeah, because the same thing is we cannot control what happens tomorrow. We can't.
Absolutely.
And then when we already have enough to deal with for today, my mom always says, live for today and hope for every tomorrow. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she goes, and that's the motto I've been using too for like the different inmate programs I use. I looked at that as myself too, because a lot of us are prisoners our mentality. And some of them who are excelled in are freer than we could ever be out here. We think because we can go to a park or look at something or download some cool video or whatever else, or, whatever, go trash talk the neighbor, we're okay. But we're literally locked inside the stress ball of something completely happening, and then we're creating these things to happen and get more sick from the stress in our bodies. So therefore we're even having more of a inner pandemic going on, so we have to go to the hospital for even more issues at this point. And now people are fearing to even go to the hospital at this point. Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. Well, and it's interesting too, because I had a conversation with a man who was living on the street in a tent underneath a freeway not that long ago. And you're talking about, the people who are inmates, but this man, completely sane, nothing, because we have this stereotype that, there must be something wrong with somebody who lives on the street.
Exactly.
He was doing it by choice. He said that living off the grid, he didn't have the regular stressors that I had and all the people around him that passed him each day. He wasn't asking for money, nothing like that. He was perfectly happy. And it just, because he didn't have to worry about paying his bills, paying the taxes, getting up and going to work, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting how it's all in your perspective. And, I always believe perception is your reality. So if you are perceiving that, the world is horrible and you are just a victim in it, that is how you're going to act. However, if you think about it like, all right, a great way to kind of try and snap out of if you wake up, it's like, we all have those days where you wake up and it's another day and you don't want to do anything.
I know that.
A great way to kind of snap yourself out of it is to just ask yourself, is there anyone else in the world having it worse than me right now?
Yes.
And really think about that.
Yes.
There's so much that we can be grateful for in any situation if we really look for it. It really is. I mean, and bottom line, first thing first, if let's say you're broke, but do you have your health? What did we say before? Without your health, nothing else matters. So if you have your health, you can recover. You can do something. You've got time.
Yeah.
So it's all in how we perceive things, and the worst thing we can do is get into that victim mode and, blame everybody else instead of just picking ourselves up and taking responsibility for our own selves, because that's the only thing we can control, ourselves. We can't control the future. We can't control what's going on with COVID-19. We can't even control, the person closest to us. We can't control another being.
Yeah, exactly.
We can only control ourselves, and it's our responsibility to take responsibility for ourselves.
I mean, there's people who can't even control their bladder. I mean, I get to that point. I'm just saying, I get to that point. If I have not, and I had too many Gatorades and some tea, look, move out of the way, quick. I'm just like, at that point.
Well, that's the body just saying, look, it's time. Gotta get. And, and isn't it funny where I, at least with my body on something like that, the closer I get to the toilet and stuff, the more I have to go.
Yes. And I'm like, don't run the water. I don't want to hear it. I'm like, don't let me hear the bathroom door slam because I know I have to wait. That really irritates me right there. I'm like, oh, come on. I was just thinking about going there. You couldn't read my mind, like, to that point of going there. And I think about that. I don't know. Like I said, the quotes are bad, but it was like the lilies of the field. It was saying something how the birds, I saw the birds. They don't freak out. They just go, they find their meal. They live that Zen life. And like you said, some people do it by choice. And a lot of, like, some of the things I was working on besides aquaponics and different things with eco sustainability, was I told people, they're like, man, what are you going to do when you reach this platform, Lex, and you get all these people, and don't you want to have the Oprah effect? And I'm like, yeah, where it matters to me and where I believe it matters most. And that is the point where my dream, even though people see millions, you could do a lot with a lot more greenery, but my dream is to have about a good 20,000 acres and just sit there on a makeshift ranch and have an aquaponics and walk out there with some orange juice in my bathrobe with my dogs running. Like, that is my thing, to wake up and just like, how, I told my mom, I'm like, how did it taste? An apple taste 100 years ago? Or how did it feel to wake up, plant your seeds, know where your food was going to come from, and not worry about, like you said, getting up for work, going through traffic? Is there a car problem? Did your coworker get pissed off at you for something you didn't know you did? Is the restaurant going to be closed? Can you afford to take someone out to an expensive dinner? But a matter of perspective is, do we live on a status mindset too? Because that gentleman you were speaking of, and different ones I talk about, are like, man, I have to get out, I have to get a job, and people are going to look at me weird in society. And I'm like, at the end of the day, what matters to you most is going to be your reality. I mean, that is the truth. Because if I look at that too, and I'm like, well, did I put my makeup on right? Or my face looks kind of weird today. I'm like, well, am I thinking that for myself, or am I thinking that for the people who have to look at me? Like,
It doesn't matter. It's how you think of yourself.
Yeah.
So if the makeup makes you feel better about yourself, put it on.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it is true. We fall into the inner critic mode so often, and we beat ourselves up unnecessarily. We don't need to do that. And so, it's a matter of, first liking yourself and then loving yourself. And then that, your mindset starts to change once you're able to do that. And remember that you can't get, a lot of us, grew up having to try and get the approval of a parent or approval of a boss or something like that. The thing is, do you really need that approval? Because the only person that you should be getting approval from is yourself. You should be happy with who you are, and if you're not happy with who you are, you change it up to get there. And and it's a matter of visualizing. You mentioned about the 20 acres, and a great way to I love doing this activity with people where I just say, create a vision board of what you want. And the vision board is, so like, let's say if you want those 20 acres, what does that look like? And then, go Google pictures that emphasize that, print them out, and then start pasting them onto a vision board or a vision binder, if you don't have room to put up on a wall. And look at that every day, because if you visualize it and you keep thinking, this is what I'm going for, this is what I want, you are setting your mindset up to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, Steve Harvey was saying something about that too, how he was living in his car for so long and different things like that. He just kept seeing this land and putting it up there and putting it up there. And finally, he just had just enough where the guy was like, look, I'm in a foreclosure, some other land. I'll give you all this land right here. Just give me what you got at that point. And I'm like, man, that's the simple life. I tell people it's a simple life to me because you don't have to overstress about the things that really aren't so difficult to just kind of let go of. But we structured ourselves to believe this is what we need to survive. This is what we need to be adequate. And I used to feel like that downtown too. Would be like, what do you mean you didn't see this TV show? Where are you living, under a rock? And I'm like, I'm reading a book. Why don't you pick one up? And I was like, and they're like, well, what do you mean you haven't went to this restaurant? It's been here for like 5 years. I'm like, it's not the point of not wanting to tip the waiter, because when I do out, that's why people love me, because I'm not too, crazy with it. But when I go out there, it's okay. I enjoy it. I'm sitting with them, but I feel myself at the table with my colleagues and my friends, and I love you guys, but I feel myself forcing myself to be there, not because I don't want to be with them, but because I'm trying to uphold the mannerism and what we're all sitting there for. The people come over to the table, we're sitting there with our nails done, our lipstick all smiling. It's nice, but I'm like, okay, I want to go to a park now. Like, I just want to sit somewhere and enjoy it. And I tell people too, like, the reason why we can enjoy life itself when we're sitting in nature is because nature is balanced. And no matter how many things we throw at it, how much garbage and litter we throw at it, how many poisons and toxins are thrown in the water, it throws stuff way off balance, but it always has a way of coming right back and balancing it out. Even like the bees know what to do. They know how to. I was just watching that last night about a beehive going on. They know how to accept the queen, what they're looking for, pheromones. Like, they know all of that. The tree knows how to replenish itself. They know when to sprout. Everything is a seed that we plant. And when we're not putting the right seeds in our own gardens, we're putting cyanide instead of putting some very crystal clear sweet water. That's when we get all this stuff right here. So in your view of everything and how you went through it and your expertise on dealing with stress on that, especially to deal with what you're going through, how can people, and I myself, please help me, how can we learn, Professor P, to get some of that? Cause I know thousands of you are listening right here. I'm not trying to be greedy, but I need some help too. Like I need the help.
Well, and you can believe me, I'm pretty busy as it is. Giving people because each person's situation is different.
Absolutely.
So there isn't a one size fits all. That's why in the book I have over 100 tips, and they're designed so that you take a couple of minutes, try it out. If it works for you, continue to use it, and if it doesn't, try another one. You didn't invest very much time, but I'll tell you one that is very popular with a lot of people because of what we've got going on right now. And we kind of touched upon it, Lex, earlier, but I like to call it the don't try to control the uncontrollable.
Okay.
So in the situation, let's take the COVID-19 situation. What is it that when we're faced with a stressful situation, it is human nature to worry about everything about it. Everything.
Yeah.
And if you look closer at it, usually from a mind share standpoint, your roughly 50% is within your control and 50% is not in your control. So what I suggest to people is, okay, draw two circles. One circle is what you can control. The other circle is what you can't control. And list out the things that you can and can't control in both circles. And then once you have that list complete, focus as much of 100% of your mind share on what you can control, ignoring all the things you can't control. So we can't control what the government does about COVID-19. You can't control your neighbor. You can't control, somebody not wearing their mask at the grocery store. What can you control? You can control wearing a mask yourself. You can control washing your hands regularly. You can control your mind share of saying, I'm not going to let this bring me down. And what happens is, if you focus your attention 100% on what you can control, when we as humans feel like we have control, our stress goes way, way down. And that is just a fundamental mind share practice. Only focus on what you can change, that you can control, and everything else, let everything else work itself out, because it doesn't matter. If you worry about it, it's not going to change anything.
Absolutely. And we had some, a lot of people had, some of different groups as far as RDDC and the different listeners have been on board. We had about maybe 1,700 emails that I think Angela said, different ones that knew and stuff like that. So when they knew this episode was going to be being aired, they were like, hey, let's understand this from a COVID understanding. I said, well, no, that's not just a COVID understanding. Like you said, those are the things we can control, and those are the things we can't control. And I looked at that and I started seeing the divorce rate skyrocket. When people were just like, I didn't know who I was living with. But I will say this as a public service announcement on here, is that I have found from the feedback when people say, I didn't know my kids the way I know them now. The positive things we can control. Being able to say, oh, I wish I had a vacation from work. Oh, I wish I had this. And it doesn't have to be a vacation, but we have to look at the positive perspectives in it and say, this is a time where I wanted to have a barbecue and just relax back. This is a time where I can't control what's going on with my money or my paycheck at this point, but what are you going to do? Suffer and just keep stressing out over what you can't control, what we can't, or enjoy the moment of where you're at this very moment itself. And we find a lot of things that we never needed to begin with. I mean, honestly, I see it as a blessing. Some people see it as a curse, and they're like, oh, well, your life's designed. No, you can design your life the way you want it to now. You can kind of look at what's going on with it and say, well, this is the things that I've noticed before. These are the things I can change right now, all this stuff. So if you start looking at stuff as a blessing instead of a curse, you won't feel like you're cursed every single day. And that's one thing I've learned to help me. The only thing that really gets me is just learning how to calm down on the Hershey's chocolate. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I should pick up a sirloin or something. Maybe I should pick up some more tofu burgers with my mom. I don't know. I just feel like I'm indulging in the moment that I'm like, this is kind of like a movie for me. that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And you are
Mm-hmm.
your own movie. So I'm like, well, whatever the next chapter is going to be, I'm just going to roll with the punches and make it work, I guess.
You know, it's interesting about, you know, the whole movie metaphor that you used, because it's, you know, we all get into these arguments that we'll have, and especially, you know, at home, if we're not used to being around our family members as much as we are right now. And, you know, if you get into an argument, one of those arguments that after it happens, it sticks with you the next day, the next week, the next month, kind of a thing. What I use as a great technique here is, so imagine, you know, think about the last time that you had an argument that was like that, Lex. So think about that person, right?
Uh-huh. And
so if you imagine looking at that person in the context of that argument, and if it's still pretty raw, that you're still mad at that person, then what you do is, after kind of gauging from like a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, their level of emotion that's tied to that encounter with that person, then what you do is you imagine yourself sitting in a movie theater, empty movie theater, and you're watching a movie of you and that other person having that argument. And then, once you imagine yourself with that, gauge from 1 to 10, what's your level of emotion? Chances are it's going to go down significantly. And then what you can do is, if it doesn't go, let's say, from an 8 down to a 1 or a 2, what you can do then is say, all right, imagine yourself in the projector booth of that theater, looking at yourself sitting in the theater, watching the movie of you and that other person having that argument. And then it drops down to a 1 or a 2. And what it is it's a simple disassociation technique in our mind. And what happens is, the farther we can separate ourselves from that encounter in our mind, the less the emotional charge.
You know, I was thinking about that movie mind. Like, when I get in arguments with the people or I feel irritated, I just look at it as a third person perspective. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, wow, this is really happening. Okay. All right. Okay, well, let me pause and rewind. Like, let me rewind. Let me
exactly.
Rewind it.
So the next time any of your listeners have that argument, and it's one that it's sticking with, and it's one of those arguments, try that technique. It's that simple disassociation. It works really well.
Yeah, you know what? That lighten is enlightening to lighten. I'm just saying that. We have hashtag Professor Petey Pablo. Okay. I told him I was going to put that out there. Hashtag Professor Petey Pablo.
I'll take all that traffic.
He is the hashtag Professor Rapper, to tell you what's going on with that stress in your life and all the things that could happen with it. So you have your book, you have different techniques out there, and what can people get a chance to kind of dive into once they do reach over to your website, or different ones that you can kind of lead them to the water a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So what I would do is I'd have them go to the website and just go to the blog. And each week I post an individual, easy to implement tip. And I'm just drawing those from the book. And so they can go in there, and I have over 80, I think there's like 85 now, because I've been posting them for the last couple of years. And so they can go in there, try one out. I have both the video as well as the text. So if you just want to read it, if you want to listen to me tell you how to do it, and give it a try. That's the thing. It's, imagine using these stress relief techniques like, you know, back in the days when we used to get to go to the restaurant and look at a menu and pick what we wanted to try. You do that with the stress relief tips. You try it. See, give it a chance. If it works for you, cool. Continue to do it and make that a regular practice. So, for example, you know, we were talking earlier, Lex, about gratitude. Gratitude was the very first tip that I published, because I have that as a daily ritual. At the end of every day, my wife and I ask each other, what are we grateful for? And we look back on our day and we say, well, grateful for this, grateful for that. I always start with, I'm grateful for my health, because all else is secondary. as I said, nothing else matters if you don't have your help. And then I start listing out all the rest of the things. And it's just a emphasis on the fact that there were good things. Even if you had one of those days where you just as soon forget, there were some things that were good. Even if it's the smallest of things like, hey, it didn't rain on me as I was going from one place to another, or, I was able to connect with a certain person on the phone or on Zoom or something like that, or somebody, said something to me that made me feel better. Minor things like that. Or heck, I'm grateful that I've got a roof over my head so that I'm not in the rain, let's say. Simple things like that. And that's, so I highly encourage, your listeners to just go there, subscribe, because I don't spam anybody. I just send once a week. I send out the next tip, and then occasionally I have a guest post that somebody sends me that I think my subscribers will enjoy, and it really helps. People love the free techniques.
You know what I will say? You can spam me any day you need to. You can spam me any day, Professor Petey Pablo Alexander. Stop. I'm like, I don't have a problem with that. Let's do a little exercise. When you were talking about that, let's do just a little exercise before we get this closing chapter here.
Sure.
I want to say, this might be a little Kanye West rant kind of thing, but it's not really. So I'm going to say it to all the emails that I've kind of blinked over the years, all the ones that recently came in and what's going on in our lives. We are thankful, okay? Or you could put, I'm going to put you, okay? I'm thankful for having that guy break up with me, because now I got a chance to spend time with myself. I'm thankful for, my girlfriend and I being together, or my wife and I being together, because I have a wonderful partner to wake up to, or just be around and come to and confide. I'm thankful for the server that sits down in the restaurants we used to sit there and eat at, and who service their time away from their family to be there to give me my fork and my knife so I could stuff my face. I'm thankful for, the ones that got out there who accepted my $5 tip when I could have gave them a 20. Let's be real here. No shade. And then on top of that, let's be real. Let's be crystal clear. I'm thankful for being able to walk down the street and not have gum stick to my shoe every minute, because there's people out there servicing the world. I'm thankful for being able to have my dog look at me every single day, knowing that I should give them an extra biscuit. I'm thankful for a lot of things. And I'm also thankful for the rain so it can nurture the earth. I'm thankful for the things that come on when it has to do with what I see as bad is also good. And what I see as good can also be used for the bad. And I will say this out there, and I love this, and it's been sticking with me, for the story of the gentleman with his son and the horses. An old man was sitting out there, and he basically said, I'm going to remind everybody, his son was at home doing his thing, and all of a sudden one wild horse showed up. I mean, it could be a different scenario. Everybody else knows, but that's what happened. And then all of a sudden the neighbors came out and said, oh, that's great. You have a wild horse. He goes, maybe. So all of a sudden, again, the next day, 5 more wild horses showed up. Oh, that's great, his neighbor said. Maybe. They couldn't understand why the guy kept saying maybe. So all of a sudden, his son was over, his older son or whatever, was in the back, sitting there trying to train and tame the wild horses, and bucked him off, and it flipped him off, and it broke his leg in like 3 pieces. Whatever happened. Obviously, the kid was in pain, and they said, oh, what misfortune happened to your son? The guy said, maybe. And then all of a sudden, the regime came in and wanted to recruit all the young men in town. Some people screaming to hold their sons back or not. All of a sudden, they looked and they said, no, he's not going to be healed for a while. We don't need him. We can't use him. Let's leave him behind. And they looked and said, oh, isn't that a blessing? Your son was saved from not being in the regime. And he said, maybe. So the whole thing is we look at things and say, well, that's a great thing that happened. And he's saying, well, maybe it is not. My son not going there, who knows? But it's a flip of a coin. And that's what, heads or tails. That's what it is. I mean, obviously a lot of people have heads. Some people have tails. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be a donkey, be a great one. Facts.
Yeah. It's a great story that just says, look, again, it's all in your perspective. It's all in your perspective.
It's all in that perspective. And if anyone would want to have any more information, I'm going to have Professor Pete Alexander's information, or Angela's going to put that up too, when it airs and Tony gets a schedule out for the Real Double Dose Channel.blogspot.com. You're going to have his whole bio, his links, and so much more. But until then, all you who are live on demand downloads and all your support, you can check out www.PeteAlexander.com. That's PETE Alexander, ALEXANDER.com for more of that, because I will be getting some stress information, and Angela and I and Tony will definitely be using that. And I thank you for that, because we need to have some things going on. And check out that Lighten stress relief model thing, because at the end of the day, the book itself is definitely beyond a book. When we all look at the fact that the information inside of it is not just a book, it's the guide to understanding how to avoid circumstances that can be avoided from what you're doing right now, what we're doing without even realizing it's going on. I mean, sometimes watching a movie is not going to take your mind off of there. It's going to be looking at that book or reading the chapters to something that is going to bring your mind to healing your body from a state of where it could get worse at. So, I just want to put that out there. So we thank you so much, Professor Pete, for coming on there. Hashtag Professor Pete Pablo. Sorry, I'm not...
Lex, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I really thank your listeners for their time as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're amazing. Hey, don't worry, this ain't our final chapter now. So I just want to put that out there. We don't just let wonderful people go, Petey Pablo. We just don't do that here. But I'm just saying, but we do appreciate and we love and your blessings, and I hope everyone's family stays safe. I hope your family stays safe. You're amazing. So remember, everyone on there who's tuning in, to remember to be the change, feel the passion, embrace the power of that wonderful spirit from within that's calling you, and for you to also nurture it. We love you. You're amazing. And we'll be back with you very, very, very soon.